It's really, really, it's not a normal business, I can tell you. In the today's world, it's not a normal business. It's a very complex operation and it has to do a lot with geopolitics. People here in the Gulf Coast making deals with companies that maybe have Russian ties, doing business with Iranian ties. There is a place in the Middle East called the Hormuz Strait. Almost the 60% of the production of the oil that goes by water. That strait was closed. Prices of the oil skyrocket. When you are in the oil and gas, you have to be thinking in all this. This is something that is a daily analysis. What is going on?
Jose Angel Pereira is on a mission to educate you on the world of petroleum industry. With 35-year experience working as the CEO of Citgo Petroleum, he shares his challenges and power factors that affect the industry. A recent major life event has shaped him into an advocate for Americans unlawfully detained overseas. Jose, I remember working at my dad's restaurant. One of the problems that I remember was the restaurant being understaffed. Some of the staff members, they give you a very short notice of absence, and the service does not go well. But being the CEO of a multinational petroleum company, you manage a lot of people. You work in this really cool environment. How did you first start off in the petroleum industry?
Thank you very much for having me first, okay? I did a long career in the oil and gas, as I was saying before we begin to record, because I come from an oil and gas family. We are like a kind of a dynasty, because my grandfather, he began working in the oil and gas in 1920s, when in Venezuela, I'm Venezuelan born. Venezuela has more than 100 years of oil and gas tradition. Today, Venezuela is not so good because there is a regime there that has destroyed the country. But if you go to the origins, 100 years ago, Venezuela was booming. By the way, at some point, Venezuela was the first oil producer of the world. And then it became like the second when erupted Saudi Arabia. But Venezuela was still the second more wealthy country in the oil production at some point. In the 60s and in the 70s and in the 80s, still Venezuela was in there. So my grandfather began working there. My grandmother worked also in the oil and gas. My father and my mother also worked there. And I began my career in 1985. So really, all my family always worked there. And I did a 35-year career in the oil and gas. And I became the CEO here in the U.S. at the U.S. base of PDVSA. PDVSA is Petróleo de Venezuela. And Citgo Petroleum is the U.S.-based company that belongs to Petróleo de Venezuela. So that's how I did my career in the oil and gas.
Oh, wow. That seems like your family tree is built on oil and gas. But if, let's say, someone who didn't come from a family that knows a lot about oil and gas, what are the requirements to be a CEO for them?
It's super challenging because any company in the oil and gas, by the way, Canada has big oil and gas company too. And Canada is one of the big competitors of Venezuela because the type of crude oil that Venezuela has that's extra heavy is exactly the same that Canada has. So I know a lot of the Canadian crude oil. So it's really challenging. It's challenging because the oil and gas is one of the most challenging industries that exists because it's a very complex operation and it has to do a lot with the geopolitics. And today, for example, all the situation that is going in the Middle East, the situation that is going in the Ukrainian war, and the situation in Venezuela has put the oil and gas are really, really challenging because all these areas are oil and gas regions. So it's really challenging. Be there.
Wow. So someone can just start first working on the oil rig and then they work their way up to a CEO.
Normally, when you do your career, it is like that. You begin from scratch. I have a finance background. I begin in the finance, but I did my career in all the way up. And normally that's the way you do your career. You begin, with a pickup, going to the oil rig or going to the refinery. So the career normally you begin is like that from scratch.
Start from the scratch. Start with a bachelor's in finance. Would you say?
I had a bachelor in finance, and I did then my MBA. I began to work in the planning side, and when I began to work in the planning side is where my career began to grow. And many people thought that I was an engineer, but my background is finance. But of course I know a lot of engineer because I work in project. I was assigned to a lot of projects.
What would you say the biggest obstacle has been for you as a CEO of Citgo Petroleum?
Well, when I was there, and when my situation, because as you know, I became a hostage, we were going a lot of political things because, as I said, Citgo belongs to PDVSA. And if you do memory, when my situation happened was in 2017. That year, here in the U.S., it was in office Donald Trump. And Donald Trump was having a lot of dispute with the Venezuelan regime because he considered that was illegitimate. And so he imposed sanctions. So I was the CEO at that moment. So it was really a nightmare navigating how to do business without not hitting any of the sanctions. It was really a real challenge.
Oh, wow. So you have to manage the people in management and manage the political atmosphere.
Definitely. I remember that I had to hire a big Washington lobbyist firm, and I have a firm that was specialized in OFAC. So any decision you were making, you had to be betting it because you can inadvertently get in the middle of some bad situation. So it's really, it's not a normal business, I can tell you. In the today's world, it's not a normal business. And it's the same today for the Ukrainian war. People here in the Gulf Coast making deals with companies that maybe have Russian ties can get into a problem because Russia now has sanctions too, or doing business with Iranian ties. So it's real a big deal work in the oil and gas.
It sounds almost like a war zone. You have to ally yourself with the right person to navigate this muddy waters of industry.
Because unfortunately the oil is in all these countries. And for example, somebody that doesn't know, today the war in the Middle East, there is a place in the Middle East called the Hormuz Strait. That is in the if you go to the map, the Hormuz Strait is very thin strait, but there navigates almost the 60% of the production of the oil that goes by water. So in this war, if they close that strait, that will be a total nightmare for the West. That happened, if the people can recall, in the 60s, when there was the Yom Kippur War, or the War of the 6 Days. That strait was closed, and that made the prices of the oil skyrocket. So that is a potential issue there where it's going. So when you are in the oil and gas, you have to be thinking in all this. This is something that is a daily analysis. What is going on?
Wow. So the Hormuz Strait is almost like the lifeline of democratic countries' oil production.
Yeah, because when you produce oil, you have to transport. But there are some super tankers that they call Aframax. Those super tankers, typically, you can load 2 million barrels. So it's very big. And they go through this strait. If they block it, all those tankers get blocked. So that the production cannot go to here, to the US, to Canada, to France, to the West countries. So that can be a potential big issue in the near future. In the near future. So this is something that when you are in the oil and gas, you have to be doing all this analysis. For example, when I was in Citgo, we had 3 refineries. There is a refinery, by the way, that is in Chicago. It's called Lemont. It's very near to the Canadian border. We always had to be monitoring how was going the turnaround in the Canadian refineries to make our own turnaround. You cannot do it alone. You have to analyze all everything and to take decisions. So it's very competitive.
I remember reading that the most sought after petroleum is light and sweet, and the lesser thought out is heavy and sour. Does the quality of the crude petroleum also matter?
Of course. Let me tell you, depending of the type of the crude is the type of crude that you can put in the diet of the refineries. The refineries here in the US that are located in the Gulf Coast, typically they need a combination of light crude oil, medium crude oil, and extra heavy crude oil. And the perfect fit for those refineries is the Venezuelan crude oil. So that's why the Venezuelan crude oil it plays a key role in those refineries. And the other good fit for that refinery is the Russian crude oil. And today, those 2 countries are having problems. So I'm not today in the refinery, but the guys that are in those refineries like Marathon, Tesoro, Valero, all these companies, Citgo, they have to be blowing their mind how they can find substitute for that. Okay, for example, there is a crude, extra heavy crude oil that is the Maya that is from Mexico, or the Canadian that can substitute, or there is someone also in the Colombia and in Brazil, but they are very complex. So the perfect fit for those refineries is the Venezuelan crude oil. That is 3 days of navigation. In 3 days, you have it there. So that's why the situation that today is happening in Venezuela is affecting a lot.
Oh, wow. So with heavy crude oil, what would you use it for?
You put in the refineries. The refinery, you have to do it's like a blend. Can you imagine? I always put this example. It's like you're preparing a smoothie. So you begin to put things and you blend it. Depending of the quality of that blend is going to be the quality of the product that you're going to refine. And it would depend of what the market is expecting there, because this is a very complex operation, because you have to understand your market. What type of gas they're going to use, what type of diesel they're going to use, because there are regulations. There are regulations of the quality of the gas and the quality of the diesel, because of, the carbon footprint, etc., etc. So you need to make the economics of what type of crude you're going to use to prepare the mix to satisfy the market. And sometimes you need part of the extra heavy crude oil. The Venezuelan crude oil, very similar to the Canadian crude oil, has a lot of sulfur. So it's very acid. So not all the refineries can fit that crude oil. Not all of them have the metallurgy to support that. So it's a really, really complex operation. So I don't know if the people can understand it, but it's really complex operation.
Right now, there's always this sort of climate warming sort of advocate on social media. They're saying all this stuff about the petroleum industry, but does the heavy crude oil pollute more than the cleaner ones?
Yeah. One of the issue of the extra heavy is that it pollutes much more. It's more messy because it's acid, so the emissions are higher. And today there is a real challenge because with that the war that's going today the Iranian, the Middle East, the turmoil in Venezuela, all these things that are happening are making it difficult to get to the 2030 carbon emission diminution because the oil is there, and when you see, for example, the eruption of the electrical cars, there's still room to improve there. The electrical cars are not ready to replace the oil. I believe the oil is going to stay a while. The oil is going to stay longer than maybe this is something that the people that are in the environmental side will not like to hear. But is that true? Because of the situation that is happening today in the world, many people would like to that the oil disappear, diminish. But the problem is that with the situation going in the world, it's going to be very difficult.
Wow. And could you use, like, for example, if you have 1 liter of heavy crude oil, could you use everything in that? Could you recycle that? Like, could you, for one part could be automotive gasoline, the other part could be maybe for the roads. Could you use everything in that liter of heavy crude?
The heavy crude, yes. The heavy crude you can use. There is a type, and again, talking about Venezuela, that's why Venezuela is a key player, because Venezuela has a very specific type of crude, that is the crude Boscan. That crude is perfect fit to create the asphalt.
Oh.
The asphalt is special for the asphalt. So that crude is needed to build up roads. And now the crude is not there because there is a petroleum ban. And they had to think other crude to replace it. And maybe the crude that could replace it is in Africa, Nigeria. There's a Nigerian crude that could substitute slightly, but Venezuela is 3 days. Nigeria you had to travel a lot to bring it. So logistically, and even for cost wise, is much more expensive. So that's when you're making those decisions. That's why this is changing the equation with all that geopolitical going in the world.
As a normal person, how can they stay on the news about the current situation, about the current political atmosphere? Is by reading all these newspapers? Is that a good way?
Yeah. No, normally the oil and gas company, they have departments. They do what they call market intelligence, and it's basically that they're monitoring all what's going on. So you have somebody that always is monitoring, and you can do it. Of course, you in top of the news, you can have more or less the sense of what's going on. Typically, the people don't do it because they believe that this is not going to affect them. Believe me, it's going to affect everybody. Anything that's going on today in the Middle East can affect all the West.
Wow, interesting. And what is the mentality that you want to pass down to your listener to survive in this economic, political tension world, and also as your experiences as a CEO?
Well, people had to. Sometimes people got disconnected of what's going on in the world, and unfortunately, anything that's going there is going to affect you. So the people have to understand what's going there, be monitoring. They cannot do nothing, of course, because you cannot influence that. But at least be prepared any situation that's going there. So normally the people tend not to understand the news of the world. Here in the U.S., this is a big issue. Here in the U.S., it's a big issue because typically the normal population are not familiar with what's going on in the world. Sometimes there is difficult that people understand this. I have had conversations that for me is difficult sometimes to explain it to the people.
So the key takeaway is for people, for listener to be more comprehensive about the news that they read and to understand the economic, political news that is happening around the world.
Correct.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jose. It has been a wonderful time talking with you. You shared lots of experiences. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you for having me.